Hello, welcome to the Crypto Winter Survivor. On this channel, I usually look at all types of crypto projects and I review them and give them ratings. However, today I decided to make a beginner's guide to crypto. And in episode 1 of this beginner's guide, we're gonna look at our current monetary system. First of all, some monetary history. The first bankers were actually the goldsmiths. They created the gold coins, and people at some point decided to store their gold coins with them because they had big vaults and stuff like that. So it was more secure, and also it was more handy to actually carry around a bunch of notes that actually says the gold is stored rather than the gold itself, because gold obviously is pretty heavy and not so handy to carry around. But in turn, the goldsmiths actually produced more notes than they actually had gold in the vaults. So this was kind of the first banking scheme that we have in the history. And of course, this in turn resulted in a lot of inflation, and the whole system kind of collapsed at some point. But this is one of the first examples we have of banking in general, and actually fractional reserve lending as well. Nowadays we just have fiat currency in the world. Before 1971, fiat currency, for example, the dollar was actually gold backed, which means there had to be a certain amount of gold in the vaults of the central banks in order to issue new dollars. And all other currencies were actually backed by the dollar in a way. So in a way, every currency in the world was kind of gold backed. Nowadays, after 1971, this changed and we don't have that anymore. And the monetary systems usually change every 40 years. If we look at the last 200-300 years, there's been a lot of new monetary systems, and we currently have our system going for 50 years. But just to give you some perspective, I wasn't born before 50 years ago, so I only know this monetary system. But you know, if we look at some bigger history, it's definitely not the only monetary system that we ever had. So therefore, we shouldn't think that it will necessarily last forever. We have central banks that actually issue the money, and these are privately owned. Many people think that governments are the ones issuing new money, but in most cases it's just privately owned central banks, and especially in the USA this is the case. And nowadays most of our world currencies are in a way linked to the dollar, so whatever happens in the US is going to affect the world pretty heavily. If we look at the US, it's been kind of on and off. There's been a battle between politics and central banking, and there are 2 presidents in the history that actually ended a central bank. This was the first and the second Bank of America. But in 1913, the Federal Reserve was founded. I see I actually made a typo there. It's Federal Reserve, not reserved. But we still have that one. So this one exists for more than 100 years, which is definitely a long time. But again, if we look at the broader history, we shouldn't just expect that this Federal Reserve will last forever. Debt-based money, all money that is issued in the world is debt-based, which means that central banks issue money and then loan it out to governments. And first of all, this gives them a lot of control by being able to inflate and deflate the money supply. And also, this means that all the money in the world is actually a interest-bearing debt, which means that there will always be more debt in the world than money. And of course, you can it's pretty easily to find out that this is mathematical unsustainable. Like, you cannot, the debt every year, the debt increases more than the money supply does, and you know, It's impossible to pay back all the debt, so this is a system that is gonna collapse at some point. To make matters worse, we have fractional reserve lending as well, which means that banks can loan out a lot more money than they actually have, and this all creates even more of a bubble of sorts where there keeps being more currency in the world, but also a lot more debt in the world. So this is, like I said, this is a system that it's gonna collapse at some point. This may be in a couple of years, and this may be in 100 years. We simply don't know, but it is impossible that this will last forever. And as we saw in the previous one, this system is relatively new. We've had a gold-backed currency 50 years ago, so we only have a purely fiat debt-based money system for about 50 years, which may seem like a long time to a lot of people, but if you just look at the broader history, this really isn't that long. And then before 1913, the government in the United States, at least, actually issued their own money rather than the Federal Reserve. Inflation, well, all of this, of course, creates a lot of inflation, because if you're gonna keep printing money, the money supply is gonna go up and inflation will hit. Fiat money basically is a horrible store of value, meaning that if you had $1 in 1913, which is again when the Federal Reserve started, this would be worth about 3 cents today. And fiat money takes about 15 to 20 years to actually lose half of its buying power. So that means that if you have $1 or €1 right now, you can pretty much buy half of the stuff that you can buy with it today in 15 to 20 years. And all of this is just in normal cases, and that's not even calculating the hyperinflation that sometimes hits. Sometimes the value of a currency can vanish overnight because it is all just trust-based. So this means that, well, if people don't have trust in either the government or the economy or whatever, the value of the currency is gonna drop really fast. And this happened, for example, fairly recently in Venezuela. But also we have cases in Germany in 1923, and there's a lot of cases. I'm not gonna name them all. You can do your own research in all the cases where hyperinflation happened, but it happens a lot more than people may think, or that we would like to see. And then as well we have deflation, which means that if loans get called in, the money supply actually decreases, and this generally leads to recessions and depressions. If we look at the big depression, this was mostly caused by just the money supply actually decreasing, and then eventually people can't get loans anymore, people can't get jobs anymore. The whole economy is going to crash if this happens. So these are the 3 things that happens, and inflation probably is the best of the 3, like the least worrying. But still, I mean, it does make for fiat money to be a horrible store of value. I mean, if you are saving for anything specific, then fiat money usually is the way to go, because, I mean, other assets can drop in value as well. However, if you just store your value, if you just store your wealth in a bank account, I mean, you're gonna lose half of it every 15 to 20 years, which probably is not something you want if you are actually saving it. Conclusion, well, our monetary system currently is extremely unsustainable. It is extremely flawed. Fiat money is a horrible store of value, and we're gonna look in our next video at Bitcoin's possible solution to this, because of course this is all a cryptocurrency related video series. However, I thought that a little bit of big background of the monetary system itself was extremely important. So, I mean, in my opinion, people sometimes ask me like, yeah, can you explain Bitcoin to me in a few minutes? Well, you will have to learn more about the monetary system itself and why it's flawed, rather than why Bitcoin might be the solution to it. So I hope you understand the monetary system a little bit better. I've linked to some interesting documentaries about this subject, and just watch them, or at least one or two of them, and you will get a much better idea than I can provide in like 10 minutes. But at least we know a bit more, and we can look at Bitcoin in the next episode. Thanks for watching, and see you in the next one.